The bitter wind howled across Europa's icy surface as Dr. Marcus Chen completed his nightly check of the research station's external sensors. Through the reinforced viewport, Jupiter's massive form dominated the horizon, its swirling storms a constant reminder of humanity's tiny place in the cosmos. 6 months into his 2-year contract studying extremophile bacteria, Marcus had grown accustomed to the solitude of being the station's sole xenobiologist. That solitude shattered with a streak of purple fire across Europa's black sky. The object, clearly a ship of unknown design, carved a glowing trench through the ice before disappearing behind a ridge 2 kilometers from the station. Marcus's training kicked in as he rushed to the command center, already calling up emergency protocols on his tablet. "Control, this is Dr. Chen. We have a potential first contact scenario." His voice remained steady despite his racing heart. "Request permission to initiate investigation procedures." The response crackled through after a 30-second delay. "Negative, Dr. Chen. Maintain station lockdown until reinforcements arrive. Estimated time: 6 hours. Marcus glanced at the external temperature readings and frowned. Nothing could survive those conditions for 6 hours without shelter. He keyed up the thermal imaging display, and his breath caught. There was a heat signature moving away from the crash site. Moving, but failing. He made his decision. "Control, I'm seeing signs of a survivor. Going to rescue ops." He killed the comm before they could object. 10 minutes later, sealed in his environmental suit, Marcus trudged through the whiteout conditions. The thermal signature had gone stationary, but still showed signs of life. As he crested the final ridge, the wind died enough for him to see her. The alien lay half buried in the snow, her silvery skin almost blending with Europa's icy surface. What he first took for clothing turned out to be an organic membrane that shifted colors like oil on water. But it was her face that stopped him cold. Despite clear alien features, the symmetry was hauntingly beautiful, almost human. Her eyes snapped open as he approached, solid black except for pinpricks of violet light. She tried to move but couldn't, her membrane suit showing signs of severe damage. When she spoke, it wasn't in words, but in harmonics that his suit's computer struggled to translate. "Stay back." The translation came through broken but clear enough. "Dangerous to you." Marcus kept his movements slow and deliberate. "I'm here to help. You'll die out here." He reached for her, but she used what strength she had left to push away. "Don't understand," she managed. "I am Himavarian. Need sustenance. Your kind. Compatible. But taking without consent. Forbidden." The pieces clicked together in Marcus's mind. The legends of space vampires weren't just stories. They were garbled accounts of previous Himavarian contacts. He quickly checked his suit's medical readouts of her vital signs. She was dying, her cellular structure breaking down from what appeared to be severe malnutrition. Marcus made his second life-changing decision of the night. He began removing his helmet. "What doing?" Her voice was weaker now. "Giving consent," he said, exposing his neck to the bitter cold. "I'm Dr. Marcus Chen, and I'm offering to help." Her violet eyes widened. "You don't understand. Bond forms. Permanent. Changes both." "I understand enough," he replied. "You'll die if I don't. And I became a xenobiologist to help life, not watch it die." She tried one last time to refuse, to warn him, but her strength was fading. Finally, necessity overcame reservation. She pulled herself up with his help, her touch sending electric shivers through his body despite the cold. "I am Lyra," she whispered in harmonics that somehow bypassed his ears and resonated directly in his mind. "Remember my name, Marcus Chen, for it will be bound to yours after this." Her feeding was unlike anything he could have imagined. There was pain, yes, but also something else, a connection forming, thoughts and memories flowing between them. He saw her world through her eyes. Vast crystal cities floating in gas-giant atmospheres, her people's desperate search for compatible species as their own biology failed them. the shame of having to sustain themselves on others. When she finally pulled away, they were both shaking, but for different reasons. The wound on his neck sealed instantly at her touch, but the connection remained, a humming awareness of her presence in his mind. "You truly did not understand what you offered," Lyra said, her harmonics now perfectly clear to him. "But I will honor the sacrifice. My life is now bound to yours, Dr. Marcus Chen." He helped her stand, supporting her weight as they began the trek back to the station. "Then we're even," he replied, "because I have a feeling my life just became bound to something much bigger than myself." Above them, Jupiter's storms continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the moment that had just changed two species forever. By the time reinforcements arrived, they would find more questions than answers, and a partnership that would reshape humanity's understanding of their place in the cosmos. But first, Marcus had to figure out how to explain to Control why he had just technically married a space vampire. The station's quarantine lab had never felt so crowded, despite holding only 3 people. Dr. Sarah Wells, the station's chief medical officer, stared at her tablet's readings for the 5th time, then back at Marcus and Lyra. "So let me get this straight," she said, pinching the bridge of her nose. "You not only initiated unauthorized first contact, but also entered into some kind of biological bond with an alien species we know nothing about." Marcus felt Lyra's amusement through their new connection. She sat perched on the examination table, her membrane suit now functioning properly enough to shift between camouflage patterns. The emergency nutrients he provided had helped stabilize her, but they both knew it was temporary. "Technically," he replied, "we know quite a bit about them now. The Himavarians have been observing humanity for centuries. Those old vampire legends, early contact attempts that went poorly." Sarah's tablet clattered onto her desk. "That's not helping your case, Marcus. Your concern is understandable." Lyra's harmonics filled the room, no longer requiring translation. "But the bond has already formed. Through it, I can share knowledge directly with Marcus. My people's history, culture, science, it's all accessible to him now." "Which is precisely what worries me," Sarah countered. "No offense, but this feels suspiciously convenient. An advanced alien species just happens to crash near our station, bonds with our resident xenobiologist, and gains direct access to his mind." Marcus felt Lyra's spike of indignation through their connection. Before she could respond, he stepped in. "It wasn't planned, Sarah. Her ship was damaged, escaping something. We haven't gotten to that memory yet. The crash was genuine, and she nearly died refusing to feed without consent." The medical officer's expression softened slightly. "And this bond, it's permanent?" "Yes," Lyra answered. "Among my people, such bonds are sacred. They cannot be broken except by death. And even then," she trailed off, her violet eyes distant. Marcus found himself completing her thought. "Even then, part of the bond remains. They've lost bondmates before, in their early space exploration. The survivors never fully recovered." Sarah studied them both for a long moment. "You're already finishing each other's sentences. That should terrify me more than it does," she sighed. "Control's not going to like this. They're already sending a containment team." "Containment." Marcus stepped protectively closer to Lyra, feeling her tension. "She's not a threat." "No." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "An alien who needs human blood to survive, with unknown capabilities, and now a direct neural link to a human with access to classified research. Try explaining that to the Security Council." Lyra stood, her membrane suit rippling with subtle patterns of distress. "I can explain everything to your authorities. My people have long sought official contact with humanity, but our biology makes traditional diplomacy complicated. We fear rejection, quarantine, being seen as parasites rather than potential allies." "What do you mean, sought contact?" Sarah asked. Marcus answered, drawing from Lyra's memories. "The Himavarians are dying. Their artificial blood substitutes are failing. Their genetic diversity is critically low. They need compatible species not just for sustenance, but for survival. And humans are compatible. Sarah's voice was flat. Exceptionally so, Lyra confirmed. But we refuse to take by force what must be freely given. It is our highest law. We would rather face extinction than become the monsters some believe us to be. A heavy silence filled the lab, broken only by the soft hum of medical equipment. Finally, Sarah spoke again. You said you were escaping something. What? Lyra's membrane suit darkened to deep purple. There are those among the other spacefaring races who believe my kind should not exist. That we are an evolutionary dead end, a threat to all humanoid species. They found our hidden outpost near Jupiter's orbit. I barely escaped with the data we gathered on human compatibility, which is now in your head, Sarah said to Marcus, along with everything else about their species. Not everything, he replied. The bond is new. Memories and knowledge transfer gradually to prevent cognitive overflow. But yes, eventually I'll know what she knows. And she'll know what I know. Sarah stood and began pacing. The containment team arrives in 4 hours. They'll want to separate you, study this bond, probably classify everything about it. They can't, Marcus and Lyra said simultaneously. He continued alone. Forced separation this early could kill us both. The bond needs time to stabilize. Then we have 4 hours to figure out how to prove to them that this bond is an opportunity, not a threat. Sarah stopped pacing and faced them. I'll help, but I need to know everything. No more surprises. Lyra stepped forward, her membrane suit shifting to formal patterns. Then let me tell you of my people's true history, and why this bond may be more important than any of us realize. It begins with our evolution on a world of eternal twilight, where we learned that survival sometimes requires mutual trust between predator and prey. As Lyra spoke, Marcus felt the weight of history flowing through their bond. The containment team was coming, but they now had an ally, and a chance to bridge the gap between two species that needed each other more than either had realized. The question was whether humanity was ready for the truth about their place in a universe where symbiosis sometimes meant salvation. And in the back of his mind, through the strengthening bond, Marcus felt Lyra's unspoken fear that those who had attacked her outpost might already be tracking her to Earth's doorstep. The proximity alarm shattered the tense silence of the station's command center. Sarah's fingers flew across the holographic display, bringing up sensor readings that made her blood run cold. 3 ships just dropped out of FTL, she announced. Configuration unknown, but they're not human and definitely not friendly. Their weapons are hot. Marcus felt Lyra's recognition, and fear surged through their bond. Purifiers, she said, her membrane suit turning ash-gray. They're an extremist faction dedicated to eliminating what they call evolutionary parasites from the galaxy. How did they find us so quickly? Sarah demanded, initiating the station's emergency protocols. The containment team, Marcus realized, pulling up their approach vector. Their communications wouldn't have been secured against advanced alien surveillance. The Purifiers must have been monitoring all human channels after attacking Lyra's outpost. The station shuddered as the first warning shot passed nearby, dissipating against Europa's magnetic field. Through their strengthening bond, Marcus could feel Lyra accessing his knowledge of the station's systems, while he gained flashes of tactical insight from her centuries of evading hunters. The maintenance tunnels, they said in unison. Marcus continued, we can reach the emergency shuttle through them. The ice layers will mask our heat signature. Sarah looked between them, then at the approaching ships. Go. I'll tell the containment team we have hostile first contact. That should keep them busy enough to cover your escape. She hesitated, then tossed Marcus her medical kit. You'll need this. And Marcus, don't get killed. I hate paperwork. They moved quickly through the station's lower levels, their bond allowing them to coordinate without speaking. Lyra's membrane suit adapted to match the metallic walls, while Marcus's knowledge of the station's layout guided their path. Above, they could hear the containment team's shuttle docking, followed by the distant thunder of weapons fire. The Purifiers won't risk destroying the station, Lyra explained as they descended. They'll want to capture me alive, study how the bond works before they kill us both. They've never managed to take a bonded pair before. Marcus helped her through a narrow passage, trying not to think about what that implied. Why are they so determined to wipe out your people? Images flashed through their bond. Ancient wars, planets quarantined, species dying from genetic plagues. They believe we're an infection in the galaxy's genetic pool, Lyra replied. That our ability to bond with other species will lead to the collapse of pure bloodlines. The irony is, they're partly right, but not in the way they think. A nearby explosion cut off Marcus's response. Warning lights flashed as emergency bulkheads began sealing. They barely made it through the last doorway, rolling together onto the shuttle bay's deck. The emergency shuttle waited ahead, its systems already humming to life in response to the station's crisis protocols. We'll never outrun their ships, Marcus said, helping Lyra up. Even if we make it off Europa, we don't have to. Lyra's membrane suit rippled with determination. I managed to save one thing from my ship before it crashed. She removed a small crystal from where it had been integrated with her suit, the complete genetic database of my people, including our research on human compatibility. The Purifiers can't be allowed to get it. Marcus felt the weight of her words through their bond. That's why you were willing to die rather than feed without consent. You were protecting this. The future of both our species may depend on it. She pressed the crystal into his hand. My people believe humanity might be more than just compatible. You might be the key to our salvation. And perhaps, we're meant to help you too. Another explosion rocked the station. Through their bond, Marcus sensed multiple hostiles converging on their position. They had minutes at most. The shuttle's automated systems can handle the launch, he said, quickly programming the guidance computer. But someone needs to stay behind to override the bay doors manually. The Purifiers disabled the main controls. No. Lyra's harmonics carried equal parts fear and determination. The bond is too new. Separation could kill us both. Marcus cupped her face with one hand, letting their bond carry what words couldn't. The bond goes both ways now. I can feel how strong you are, strong enough to survive. The crystal is what matters. Your people's future matters. Marcus, her violet eyes held his as understanding passed between them. She could feel his resolve, his acceptance of what must be done. Get to Earth, he said, pressing his forehead to hers. Find Dr. Elena Santos at the Pacific Xenobiology Institute. Sarah will send her the data about our bond. She'll understand what it means. She'll help. The bay doors began to groan as someone tried to force them open from the other side. In one fluid motion, Marcus pushed Lyra into the shuttle and sealed its hatch. Their bond screamed at the separation, but he forced himself to focus through the pain. You humans, Lyra's voice resonated in his mind as the shuttle's engines fired up, always sacrificing yourselves for others. Perhaps that's why you're exactly what my people need. Stay alive, he sent back through their bond. Find Dr. Santos and Lyra. Thank you for showing me that sometimes the most human thing we can do is trust someone different from ourselves. The bay doors finally burst open as Marcus slammed the manual launch override. The last thing he saw before plasma fire filled the air was the shuttle streaking away, carrying with it both his bonded partner and the hopes of two species. He raised his hands as armed figures in biomechanical armor surrounded him. Interesting, said a voice that seemed to bypass his ears entirely. The bond survives even at this distance. Perhaps this human will prove more useful than we anticipated. As they led him away, Marcus focused on the faint pulse of Lyra's presence in his mind, growing more distant but still there. He had bought her time. Time to reach Earth. Time to find allies. Time to prepare for what was coming. Because through their bond, in those final moments together, They had both glimpsed a truth that changed everything. The Purifiers weren't just hunting Hemivarians. They were preparing to cleanse the galaxy of all species they deemed impure, and humanity, with its remarkable genetic compatibility, was next on their list. Dr. Elena Santos stared through her lab's quantum microscope at the sample on the slide, her dark eyes wide with wonder. Beside her, Lyra watched intently, her membrane suit shifting through shades of anxious indigo. "It's incredible," Elena breathed. "The way your cells interact with human DNA, it's not parasitic at all. It's more like they're completing each other." Yes, Lyra's harmonics carried both hope and sadness. But understanding why has cost us dearly. Her hand unconsciously touched her chest, where the bond with Marcus pulsed faintly despite the distance. Through it, she could sense he was alive, but in pain, being held somewhere cold and dark. The lab's security systems hummed quietly as Elena brought up a holographic model of the cellular interaction. "Your people's genetic structure is deteriorating because it's incomplete," she said, "like a puzzle missing crucial pieces, and somehow human DNA contains those pieces. We evolved as symbiotic beings," Lyra explained, watching the model spin. "On our twilight world, we developed alongside another species. We sustained each other, grew together. But they died out millennia ago, from a plague engineered by..." She trailed off. "The Purifiers?" Elena asked softly. "Their ancestors. They've spent generations trying to enforce their vision of genetic purity." Lyra's membrane suit darkened with anger. "They destroy our evolutionary partners, thinking it would end us too. Instead, we adapted, learned to create synthetic substitutes. But those are failing now." Across the solar system, in a facility hidden within the asteroid belt, Marcus Chen was learning the same truth from a very different perspective. Fascinating response to the separation. The Purifier scientist noted, their thoughts resonating directly in Marcus's mind. "Most bonded pairs die when forced apart. Yet you endure." Marcus said nothing, focusing on breathing through the pain of their latest test. His cell was cold, sterile, but at least they'd stopped trying to break his connection to Lyra. They'd learned quickly that doing so caused feedback that damaged their equipment. "Your species is remarkably resilient," the scientist continued, adjusting something that made Marcus's nerves feel like fire. "Perhaps too resilient. Did you know you're not the first humans we studied?" Images flashed through Marcus's mind. Other facilities, other tests, decades of secret observation. The Purifiers had been watching Earth for generations, seeing humanity's potential for adaptation as both a threat and an opportunity. "Your genetic structure," the scientist mused, "has extraordinary potential for controlled evolution. Properly guided, humanity could become the perfect species. Pure, untainted, free from the need for parasitic relationships." Marcus laughed despite the pain. "You still don't understand," he gasped. "After all your studies, you've missed the most basic truth about human evolution." The scientist paused their work, genuinely curious. "Oh, we became human because we cooperated, learned to trust, to help others even at cost to ourselves." Marcus forced himself to sit up, meeting the scientist's inhuman gaze. "We're at our best when we connect with those different from us. It's not weakness. It's our greatest strength." Back on Earth, Elena's lab erupted with excitement as her computer completed its analysis of the genetic database Lyra had brought. "It's not just compatibility," Elena announced, her fingers flying over the holographic controls. "The bond you form. It's activating dormant genetic potential in both species. Look." The display showed 2 DNA helixes, one human, one Hemivarian, slowly intertwining. Where they touched, new patterns emerged, more complex and stable than either original. "Your people weren't evolving toward extinction," Elena said, wonder in her voice. "You were evolving toward a new form of symbiosis, and humanity has been unconsciously evolving to meet us." Lyra finished. "The Purifiers were right to be afraid, but not because we're parasites. They're afraid because we represent the truth they've been denying. That evolution favors cooperation over isolation, diversity over purity. Through their bond, Marcus caught fragments of this revelation. Even across the vast distance, he felt Lyra's surge of hope. The pain of their separation faded slightly as understanding flowed between them. "Your tests are pointless," he told the Purifier scientist. "You can't stop what's coming. Evolution itself is against you." The scientists tilted their head. "You seem very confident for a prisoner." Marcus smiled. "I'm not just connected to Lyra anymore. Through her, I can feel others. The bonds are spreading, aren't they? That's why you're getting desperate." Alarms began blaring throughout the facility. The scientists' composure cracked as reports flooded in. More Hemivarian ships detected, approaching from multiple vectors. But these weren't running or hiding. They were hunting. "You should have killed me when you had the chance," Marcus said quietly. "While I've been here, distracting you with tests, Lyra's been busy. Humanity knows the truth now. About you. About them. About everything." On Earth, Lyra stood before the United Nations Security Council, her membrane suit glowing with formal patterns as she presented the evidence. Alina's research confirmed everything. The Purifier's generations of interference, the true nature of human Hemivarian compatibility, and the choice humanity now faced. They could embrace this new step in evolution, accepting the bond with another species that would strengthen them both, or they could give in to fear, following the Purifier's path of enforced purity and eventual stagnation. The choice, when it came, was surprisingly easy, perhaps because humans had been making the same choice throughout their history. To reach out, to trust, to grow through connection rather than isolation. As humanity's answer echoed across space, Marcus felt the facility around him trembling under the first waves of attack. Through their bond, Lyra's determination blazed like a star. "Hold on." Her thoughts reached him clearly now, strengthened by thousands of new bonds forming across the solar system. "We're coming." The Purifiers were about to learn that evolution had a sense of irony. In trying to prevent what they saw as genetic contamination, they had instead catalyzed the very thing they feared most. The birth of a new form of life, one that proved diversity wasn't weakness, but the ultimate strength. The Purifier facility shook under another barrage as Marcus felt the bonds growing stronger. Not just his connection to Lyra now, but echoes of thousands of others. Humans and Hemivarians choosing to trust, to connect, to evolve together. Each new bond weakened the barriers between their species, creating something entirely new. "You've doomed your entire species," the Purifier scientists snarled, their composed facade finally cracking as emergency lights bathed the laboratory in crimson. Humanity had such potential for purity, for controlled advancement. Now you'll be nothing but cattle for these parasites. Marcus laughed, even as the restraints holding him began to automatically release during the facility's evacuation sequence. "You still don't understand what's happening. This isn't about feeding or control. It's about choice, about trust." He stood, steadier than he should have been after weeks of testing. "Humanity chose this. We chose to reach out instead of hiding behind walls of fear." Through their bond, he felt Lyra coordinating the attack. Human ships fought alongside Hemivarian vessels, their crews linked by new bonds that made them devastatingly effective against the Purifier defenses. But more importantly, he felt her getting closer. "Your people are young," the scientist said, backing away as Marcus advanced. "You cannot comprehend the galactic order you're disrupting. These bonds, this evolution, it will spread beyond your species. Others will see, will want the same connection. Centuries of careful genetic isolation. Ruined." "Good," Marcus replied simply. A nearby explosion sent equipment crashing around them. Maybe it's time the galaxy remembered that diversity breeds strength. That cooperation isn't weakness. The scientist reached for a weapon, but Marcus was faster. Weeks of neural testing had left him hypersensitive to their thought patterns. He knocked the weapon away, just as the laboratory's reinforced doors exploded inward. Lyra stood in the wreckage, her membrane suit radiating patterns of power and purpose. Behind her, a mixed team of humans and Hemovarians secured the room. But Marcus barely noticed them. Through their bond, he and Lyra were already reconnecting, sharing everything they'd learned during their separation. The bonding process, he said aloud, letting the scientist hear. It's not just changing individual pairs. It's changing both species at a fundamental level. With each new bond, we're becoming something more than either of us were alone. Stronger together, Lyra agreed, her harmonics carrying both love and triumph, as nature intended, as evolution demands. The scientists slumped in defeat as they were secured. You cannot contain this. Other species will learn of it. They will fear it. The purifiers are not alone in our belief that species should remain pure, separate. We're counting on it, Lyra replied. Let them see what happens when fear gives way to trust, when artificial barriers fall before natural evolution. Marcus felt the truth of it through their strengthened bond. Already, the changes were spreading faster than anyone had predicted. Children born to bonded pairs showed signs of both species' strengths with none of their weaknesses. More importantly, they were born with an innate ability to form connections, not just with each other, but with all forms of life. The next step in evolution wasn't about physical superiority or genetic purity. It was about breaking down the walls between species, between minds, between hearts. Humanity's greatest strength had always been its ability to adapt, to connect, to grow through cooperation rather than conquest. Dr. Elena Santos confirmed it. Lyra said, taking Marcus's hand. The bonds aren't just saving my people, they're accelerating human evolution. Each connection creates new neural pathways, unlocks dormant genetic potential. We're becoming something neither of our species could have achieved alone. Through their bond, Marcus shared a vision of the future, one where the barriers between species fell away, where diversity was celebrated rather than feared, where evolution itself was driven by cooperation instead of competition. You've unleashed chaos, the scientist warned as they were led away. The galaxy isn't ready for such change. The galaxy doesn't have a choice, Marcus replied. Change is the only constant in the universe. The only real choice is whether to face it alone or together. Later, as human and Hemovarian ships secured the facility, Marcus and Lyra stood at a viewport watching Earth rise over the asteroid belt. Through their bond, they shared not just thoughts and feelings, but hopes for the future they'd helped create. Your people took an incredible risk, Marcus said, revealing yourselves, offering the bond, trusting humanity to choose connection over fear. And your people showed incredible courage in accepting, Lyra replied, her membrane suit shimmering with patterns of joy and love. Choosing to evolve, to change, to grow beyond what you were. Perhaps that's why our species were meant to find each other. The facility's computers had revealed the full scope of the Purifier's plans. Their generations of manipulation, their fear of change, their desperate attempts to keep species separate and pure. But in doing so, they had inadvertently created the perfect conditions for a different kind of evolution. They thought they could control evolution through isolation, Marcus mused. Instead, they brought together the two species most ready to prove them wrong. Lyra's harmonics carried her amusement, a vampire and her willing donor, changing the course of galactic history. Your old stories got it slightly wrong. How so? It was never about the blood, she said, touching the place where she had first fed from him. It was always about trust, about choosing to help another despite the cost, about believing that differences can make us stronger, not weaker. Through their bond, they felt the ripples of change spreading across the solar system and beyond. Other species were already reaching out, curious about the bonds, about the possibility of evolution through cooperation rather than competition. The Purifiers had been right about one thing. This was just the beginning. But it wasn't chaos they had unleashed. It was hope. Hope for a future where diversity was strength, where trust overcame fear, and where evolution itself was guided not by the survival of the fittest, but by the triumph of cooperation over isolation. As Earth turned below them, Marcus and Lyra sealed their victory with a kiss that bridged not just two hearts or two minds, but two species that had found in each other the key to their mutual salvation. Their bond, and the thousands like it now forming across space, was proof that sometimes the greatest evolutionary leap comes not from standing alone, but from reaching out to another and saying, "Together, we can become more than we ever dreamed."